It's disgusting. It's repulsive. It's incestuous. Hello, hello, hello. I refuse to watch the Umbrella Academy show out of spite, which is why I'm reading all the comics for your watching enjoyment on YouTube. If you haven't seen part 1 where I read Umbrella Academy Apocalypse Suite, maybe go do that, maybe don't. Hey, I'm not your mom. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of me reading all the Umbrella Academy comics. I'm your host, the physical embodiment of teenage angst, and today we're going to be reading Umbrella Academy Dallas. This is the second book in the 3 collected editions of the comics that have been published so far, and first one that I've read that I'm able to show the cover of on YouTube. As you can see, there's a short guy who looks kind of melanated, looks kind of racialized. Good for him. Yeah, we're twins. He's the short guy in an Umbrella Academy suit. You can see the crest right here. Wearing a Kennedy pin, holding a giant musket. I think it's a musket, a rifle? I have no idea. I'm not a gun person, but I'm thinking this is number 5. In the last issue, he started talking about the Kennedy assassination, and then he fainted. But you can see Kennedy. Let's just get right into it. Wait, hello, this is Neo from the future after he's read this, and I just want to say, if I falter in explaining all the plot points from this, in this video today, it's because they're kind of hard to explain. You kind of have to be there, which is why I would probably recommend that you read this. And that's spoilers of my opinion of this book. It's really good. But, yeah, you had to be there. Dallas is very similar to the beginning of Apocalypse Suite in that it's a flashback to when the Umbrella Academy people were all kids, and if my math is right, they should be somewhere around 10, 12-ish, I don't know, at the beginning, and it starts with them fighting the Lincoln Memorial come to life. Sound familiar? Last time they fought the Eiffel Tower, and this fact is conveniently lampshaded by Diego? Yeah, Diego's like, are we really fighting another monument? That's so crazy. Yeah, and they fight it, and Allison says to Lincoln, I heard a rumor that you got assassinated. And then a giant statue, similarly to the Lincoln Memorial, a giant statue of John Wilkes Booth comes out of nowhere and shoots Lincoln in the back of the head, and he dies. Unfortunately, after that, they do not get ice cream like they did in the first book when they fought the Eiffel Tower. Instead, Hargreaves says, oh, children, we have something much better than ice cream. Throughout all this, I conveniently forgot to mention that before the fight started, Hargreaves was talking to the president. I don't know which president. I think it's Kennedy, considering the fact that Kennedy's on the cover. But, I don't know. The art style isn't, all white men look kind of the same to me, and the art style isn't detailed enough for me to be able to distinguish which specific white man this is. So yeah, Hargreaves is talking to the president, and they're talking about missile launchers, and the president is talking about some great tragedy that the Umbrella Academy kids have to fix. And then Hargreaves is like, yeah. About those missiles, though. So maybe some kind of a trade in which the Umbrella Academy kids do something, and then Hargreaves gets missiles in return? I don't know. Anyways, after that, we flash forward to present day. And there's a milkman with 4 bottles of milk in a basket that comes by to the remains of the Hargreaves mansion. I'm saying remains because it's really battered up from the last book. They haven't rebuilt yet. After the last book's fight with the Orchestra of Redemption, they're still in recovery, I guess. But Hargreaves' Indian assistant, who does have a name, but I'm not going to try to say the name because I either say it in a really white way and I cringe, or I say it in a really brown way and I cringe. So we'll just call him Hargreaves' Indian assistant. I don't care if that's racist. I get to be racist towards Indians, okay? It's my birthright. He grabs the milk and brings it down to the basement, the underground bunker where the Umbrella Academy is headed now, where Luther is huddled up in front of a TV, eating cookies, watching Celebrity Surgery, a show about plastic surgery, I guess. And then Luther realizes out of cookies and makes the Indian assistant call Seance, who is at a salon, a beauty salon. And he's getting his hair done and his nails done. He looks super cute. And then the Indian guy tells Seance to get cookies for Luther, but Seance is like, no, I don't think I'm gonna do that. I'm famous now. I literally saved the city. So I don't think I'm gonna get cookies for you, love. So he tells the assistant to tell Allison to buy the cookies. And then we cut to Allison, who is sitting in a hospital room looking thing, like a med bay type deal, with Vanya. Vanya, who's laying down, she looks really unhinged, and she still looks like a white lesbian like she did in the last book. I don't think she can play violin, and she has lost her memory entirely. And Allison still can't talk because her throat got slit in the last volume. Allison is communicating to Vanya through like writing in her notebook. Vanya's questioning who she is, and Allison explains that she's her adopted sister. And then, so it's very obvious that Vanya has no memory at all. And then Allison puts her in a wheelchair and rapidly runs her towards a room where she straps her into a chair and makes her watch the news, I think. The room has a bunch of like little TVs. It's like one of them surveillance camera type looking rooms, but has a bunch of little TVs, and they're all playing news. So there's the news about gas main eruptions, about the fight with the orchestra of Rodampton. She's scaring her. Allison is trying to scare Vanya or something by showing her the doom and gloom on the news. And there's a shot of Vanya as she starts to cry. So, good job, Allison. You made your sister cry. She's just like me. She's literally just like me. Anyways, and then we cut to downtown where, what's his name? Where Diego is fighting this random guy, questioning about the Costello murders and the night in the diner. I assume this refers to the night in the diner from the first book, where, what's his name? Five and Pogo were sitting, and there was those weird Monsters University looking guys that come in and start fighting with them. And then the guy that Diego is fighting against says that he only saw those freaky looking Dayglow cosmonauts, the Monsters University people that started fighting. And then Diego's like, are you sure you didn't see a little boy or a chimpanzee? Obviously Five or Pogo. And the guy says no. And then Diego throws him away and goes back. And then we cut back to Allison, who's standing in front of a memorial, a statue of Pogo. And then she's being very sad. And their mom, who's the robot mannequin, comes up and starts talking to her and telling her that Five built the memorial after Pogo passed. Because Five loved Pogo. And I love Pogo too. I was really upset that Pogo died. Come on, guys. He was a monkey. He never did anything wrong. Why do you have to die? And then her mom tries to, comfort Allison. Well, not comfort Allison, but, explain to Allison, remind Allison that what Vanya did in the previous volume wasn't actually Vanya. She was brainwashed by the orchestra. And then we can see a huge scar right over here that Allison has from when her throat was slit. Obviously, her vocal cords are completely lost now, which is why she can't speak. And she's really upset. And her mom says, you're still the prettiest girl in the world. And Allison writes, that's great, and scowls sarcastically. And then her mom is like, you can stand there pitying yourself, or you can go and do something productive like Five is doing. And then we cut to Five, who's sitting in front of a dog track, clearly betting on losing dogs. Love, you're number 5, you're not Mitsuki. Stop betting on losing dogs, okay? That's none of your business. That's not your job. But yeah, he does that. His dog loses. Gambling addicted old men, middle-aged men. That's funny. It is funny. And then Five goes out into the parking lot, and he has a car that he's going to drive. So he goes out into the parking lot, and then the Monsters University looking guys come out. A whole crowd of them surround him in the parking lot. And then Five refers to them as the Temps Eternalis, the Temps Eternalists, the TA, the teacher's assistants, you could say. And then they say that they don't want any trouble, they just want to finish the job, whatever that means. And then Five goes on a speech about how tigers never reveal their stripes or something. Well, aren't you a bunch of tigers? So hungry, so poised, all sharp teeth and swagger. A tiger shows 100 stripes, but I know it has more than that. A tiger hides them. Do you know where it keeps them? And then the Monsters University guy's like, nor. And then Five says, here's a hint. And presses, this is really gruesome, presses his thumbs into the eyes, like that. Both his thumbs into the eyes of the Monsters University guy. And blood is everywhere. And then they all start, the entire crowd of Monsters University guys start shooting at him. And then he's fighting everyone. And then He has a giant gun, probably the giant gun from the cover. He has a giant gun. And then there's like a giant fight scene. And then at the end of it, there's like a giant pile of corpses in the parking lot. And then Five says something about how he's in the jungle and he's too fast and he's so cool. He's like, oh, I'm a gazelle, and I am a gazelle and the jungle is my home. And I don't think gazelles live in jungles. That can be very wrong on me, but like, gazelles, aren't they like in the savannah or something? Wait, whatever. I don't think gazelles live in the jungle. But yeah, there's a giant pile of Monsters University corpses, and then except for one guy who's calling through his walkie-talkie, calling someone through his walkie-talkie and telling them to send Hazel and Cha-Cha. I have no idea who Hazel and Cha-Cha are, but as soon as he hears this, Five is panicked. He's screaming. He's like, no, we're screwed. We're literally dead. There's no point in fighting this anymore. Because Hazel and Cha-Cha are being sent, I guess, and that's the end of chapter 1. Woo! Let's get on to chapter 2. So, chapter 2? That was tight as hell, man. That was a good chapter. Holy shit. Okay, so it starts off, right, with this picture of a monkey lady, but, it starts off, right, at the diner where, Five and Pogo were in the last book, and then there are these two people. One person in, like a blue, like, I think dog bear, kind of smiling dog bear mask, right? And another person in, like, a mask of, like, a floppy-eared dog with a pink head, right? Well, I assume they're masks. It could be their real head. This is a wild comic world, but, yeah. And then they're eating pie at the diner, and they're just being casual. They're just talking to each other, chill. And then the waitress gets real horrified, and is like, oh, we don't want any trouble. And then the two guys, they're like, oh, this is really good pie. What's in it? And then the cook at the diner is like, once had a man come all the way from Barcelona trying to get the recipe, offered me $5,000 for it. I tells him, you'd have to chop off my arms and legs to get that out of me, heh. And there's like a close-up shot on those two guys' faces. Oh, it's so intense, right? And then we cut to like this apartment house that they're in, and then the two guys are talking about like Girl Scouts cookies, and they're taking off like gloves and then handling instruments, weapons like that are like covered in blood. They're in like a really beat up apartment building, very classic kind of vibes, kind of film noir, I believe is the term. I don't know. They're just talking about Girl Scouts cookies, and then one of them, who's Hazel that Five was freaking out about in the last chapter, Hazel like answers the phone, and it's from the boss. So if this one's Hazel, I assume this one, the pink one, is Hazel, and the blue one is Cha-Cha. But Hazel answers the phone, starts talking to the boss, and then he's like, he's talking. We don't get to hear what the boss is saying, but Hazel is like, oh yeah, I totally forgot. And then he goes into another room, and there's blood all over this room, right? And then he's like, have you seen a little boy? And he says this to like a person that we can't see the face of. And then Cha-Cha's like talks like a grown-up, and Hazel's like kind of a jerk. And then we have this amazing picture of like a dark kind of like shitty looking room, like this waitress, like the waitress huddled up in a corner, with her arms and legs tied up, with like blood on her legs, and the cook like tied into a chair with an apron, blood all over his face and his apron, his arms and legs cut off, and then he's like, we used canned apples. And then Hazel and Cha-Cha are like, what the hell is he talking about? But yeah, and then we cut to a police precinct, where, what's his name? The police officer from the last book, the one that was interrogating the waitress at the diner after Pogo and Five left with the Monsters University guys. They're there at the precinct and they're just talking. So I think it's like really normal for this world to have like chimpanzees talking, because this police officer's assistant is a chimpanzee. Well, I don't know if it's a monkey or chimpanzee or other kind of ape, I don't know. And then there are monkey type people like all around the office. So the officer and the ape like go into the office, and guess who's there but Diego's sitting in the officer's chair, and then they just ask him a bunch of questions, and then they ask him about number 5, the little brother, and then Diego starts talking about how like he has really good aim, and then he says, "I'd bet my good eye he's a commie." That's funny. That's literally funny. I don't know why, but it is. What is this, the 1950s Red Scare? I mean, actually, maybe, I don't know. Maybe this is some kind of like alternate history thing, but like, I bet my good eye he's a commie. Then Diego and the police officer start talking about the crime scene at the dog track and how it matches the MO, which I don't know what that means. It probably means like murder object method of, I don't know what it stands for. I'll find out. But the MO of the dog track scene, with a pile of Monsters University corpses, matches the MO of what happened at the diner. And then the police officer describes it as merciless slaughter executed with the precision of a neurosurgeon. And then Diego climbs out of a window and leaves. And then we cut to like Diego and Luther just arguing, and Diego calling Luther fat, and it's all very pointless. And then we see Seance, who I've recently remembered, I guess, that his name in the show, Seance's name in the show is Klaus. Klaus is really hot, but whatever. And then we have Seance with like a bag of vodka, I think. I don't know what it is, like leaving the place. And then Allison is like, "Diego, you're such a big detective. You don't even know where number 5 is," because no one really knows where number 5 is these days. But anyways, and then we cut to like this white blonde-haired guy who could very well be a Nazi, but he looks like the Ubermensch guy who's really rich get out of his like private jet. And then he's really rich and he gets into a limo where he has an assistant. And then they're just talking. I don't know if any of this is going to be useful, so I don't know what part of it to mention, because an important skill in summarizing is only summarizing the parts of the story that's relevant to the overall thing instead of just random details. But I don't know what's going to be relevant because I haven't read all of it yet, so that's a struggle. But they're just talking about random things. This Ubermensch guy wants a avocado salad. He just got back from Mumbai and he said there's nothing in Mumbai for him to eat. Which, can we be serious? Guys, can we be incredibly serious? Like, come on. But yeah, he orders an avocado salad and he's talking to his assistant in a limo, and then he punches the lights out of the assistant. So, good for him, good for him. And then after that, we cut to this like hotel room where there's like a chimp that's like dressed up, wearing I don't know if it's a blonde wig or if chimps can grow blonde hair in this universe, but a chimp wearing a blonde wig, like dancing and singing "Mr. President, Happy Birthday," and then Five getting drunk out of his mind, like sitting in a chair in the hospital, and someone kicks in the door, and it's Allison. Allison throws him what I think is a glass eye, and I remember there being a glass eye in the show, I think. So maybe it's like that. But throws him a glass eye, and then Allison says, "I want to know everything." So I guess she wants to know everything. And then we cut to Klaus sitting in front of Pogo's memorial, maybe it's a grave, with a Ouija board. And they're just talking. I don't know if they're talking or not, but I mean, I guess he can like commune with the dead. His name is Seance, so maybe that's what he's doing. And he's just talking to the grave, and then he gets his face like hit with a baseball bat, and then it's Hazel and Cha-Cha. And Hazel and Cha-Cha are actually really wholesome guys. They like exchange Thin Mints, and it's just cute. It's just really cute. But yeah, they plan to interrogate Seance when he comes to about the whereabouts of number 5. I don't think he knows. And that's chapter 2. Let's move on to chapter 3. And if it's like half as good as chapter 2 was, I will continue to love this book, because hot dang. Woo! So, this chapter, not as good as chapter 2, but still pretty awesome. So, let's see. It starts with, like, Seance using, like, his magic brain powers to, like, go through a TV to, like, wake up Luther to try and get him to save him. But it doesn't work. Well, it does kind of work, but not really. Not to the same extent we wanted. In that Luther does wake up, but the TV, like, explodes or something. Anyways. So it's revealed that, Seance has been taken to the exact place where, Hazel and Cha-Cha took the waitress and the cook, right? The same shitty-looking building, apartment, whatever. And then it turns out that Seance can't use any of his powers because he's wearing shoes, because apparently him wearing shoes prohibits the use of his powers, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But it is not as stupid as him using his magical, random, never-before-seen telekinesis powers to save the Earth from a hurtling chunk of the moon, like what happened in the last book. So I'll let it pass. And then it turns out that they tortured him and interrogated him the night before. Well, he does look really beaten up, so that makes sense. But they could not find the whereabouts of number 5, because obviously Seance had no idea, because no one has any idea where that little man is at any time. But what they could find out was the location of Hargreaves' nuclear bombs that he got from the president at the beginning of the book, I assume. I don't know. And then Hazel and Cha-Cha are like, we're going to use these nukes to make sure number 5 is dead if you don't tell us something. So then, like, Klaus is like, wait. I'm calling him Klaus. I don't know if that's what he's actually called in the book. He hasn't been called that in the book yet. So, anyways, and then we cut to 5 explaining everything to, what's her name, Allison. So basically, what happened to him was he's from the future. He started to go back so that he could prevent the end of the world. But he got caught by some people from the Temps Aeternalis, the TA, the teacher's assistants, those Monsters University looking guys. And then 5 is like not experimented on, but like physically and chemically changed so that his cells are different. And we have intestines on the page. It's very serious surgical work. And they halted his aging process, augmented his deteriorated form, and prepared him for training. And he was real good. Basically what they had him doing was rehabilitating the time continuum. They call them corrections, and then number 5 loved them. Number 5 loved doing corrections. And they had a bunch of agents just like him, people that were like taken out from the normal timeline for some reason or the other, and then forced to do corrections. None of them had his powers, but some of them were a lot more violent than him. And as it turns out, Hazel and Cha-Cha were SS officers. They were Nazis. I assume from literal Nazi times. Because they have, like, Nazi armbands in this one shot. He was more subtle. And then he was recruited to do assassinations, and he would do a lot of assassinations. I think he assassinated Nixon? I don't know. No, not Nixon. I don't know what he was doing. But there's a guy that looks awfully like Nixon that he did kill. So, yeah, he was assassinating people. But he was chill about it. He didn't really care. And then he was looking through, like, his records, like the records of all the surgeries and stuff that they did to him. And it turns out he has, like, DNA from a bunch of famous assassins. Like, I don't recognize most of these, but there's Gavrilo Princip, who was the guy that finally managed to kill Franz Ferdinand to kick off World War I. So, yeah, like, he's a bunch of assassins put into one, which is why he's an awesome-ass assassin. And then, I think they wanted him to kill Kennedy, and then he rebelled. or something. So then there's that. And then we cut to Luther in the shitty apartment building where Hazel and Cha-Cha and Seance are. And so it is confirmed that Seance's name in the comic is Klaus as well, like it is in the TV show, because Luther calls him Klaus in this one scene. And then it looks like Klaus is dead because he's like tied up to a chair and he's like this, and there's some blood dripping off him. So obviously he's dead. And then Luther's like, oh my god, and then he gets like electro-zapped by Hazel, and then he faints. And then it looks like Klaus is definitely dead because he's in heaven, and like the location thing even says he's in heaven. And in heaven, everything is white. It's not white like skin color white as in like white like the wall, white like Vanya, I guess. And then it's also so it's white. Well, it's black and white. Like the borders of everything are black, but like everything is filled in white, and it's like a cowboy Wild West type situation. There are cacti and stuff everywhere. And then there's like this cowboy on a horse, and it turns out he's God. And Klaus is like, I'm agnostic. And God is like, okay, what do you want me to do about it? And then Klaus gets kicked out of heaven because God doesn't like him. But God is also convinced that the devil isn't going to like him either. So I guess he gets kicked out of the afterlife. But before that happens, God gives him a piece of advice. It's always a longer walk to the men's room, buckaroo. And then God says, stop being such a fairy and kill those two sons of bitches. And stay off the drugs, Klaus. Probably both good pieces of advice. And then number 5 is briefly explaining how he escaped from his situation. And then he says that going back in time is kind of hard, which is why he appeared back in his 10-year-old form. And then there's this giant robot thing, but its head is like a fish tank, and there's a goldfish in it. That goldfish guy is Five's old supervisor from when he used to work for the Temps Aeternalis, the TAs, the teachers' assistants. I've said that joke 3 times now, so it's officially unfunny. And then basically Goldfish Man says to Five, that if you don't come with me to kill President Kennedy right now, I'm literally going to kill your mom. I'll go back in time and kill your mom. I literally have people my agents about to kill your mom 2 days before she's meant to give birth to you. So, yeah. And then he's like, Allison, love, because at this point, Five and Allison are getting dinner together. That's who Five is explaining the entire thing to, if it wasn't clear. The Goldfish Man is like, Allison, love, come with us. It's going to be really fun. And Allison's like, why should I? Why should I care about any of this? And Goldfish Man is like, because you guys are twins, or something. So... that was particularly good, but I would say it was kind of awesome. Okay, so it starts, Luther is having some sort of hallucination or a dream or something, where he married Allison and had kids, and then something, and then Hargreaves is there, and then he wakes up, and then it turns out the waitress from the diner took off Klaus's shoes for him while he was unconscious, because he said that earlier he had said that he wouldn't be caught dead in those shoes. They're kind of ugly shoes. They're neon green and pink. And then since Klaus isn't wearing shoes anymore, that means he can use his powers. So what Klaus does is he possesses the body of Cha-Cha. And while Hazel is dealing with setting the nukes up so that they explode, Cha-Cha pulls a gun on him and kills him, and then kills himself. But obviously this isn't Cha-Cha's work. This is Klaus possessing Cha-Cha. He also apparently disarmed the nukes. So at this point, I'm thinking Klaus, man, he's super overpowered. Are you kidding? He has telekinesis that can stop chunks of the moon hurling towards the earth. He can possess people and make them shoot themselves. He can commune with the dead. He apparently knows how to disarm nukes. I don't know. He's too OP. Far too OP. It's not... narratively satisfying for him to be so OP, but he is. Anyways, and then we cut to the Perseus building, which is the headquarters of the Perseus Corporation, which is, I don't know, some bigwig corporation in this world, headed by the Ubermensch guy from earlier, the guy that came back from Mumbai on his private jet and punched his assistant. Remember him? Yeah, he's back. He's in a boardroom meeting, and it turns out he has bought all the stocks of his company, so all the board members are apparently dismissed, and he's talking about using the money that he has to do experiments. So, I guess he's gonna do that. Anyways, and then we cut to a place called the Office at the End of Time, where there's a bunch of Monsters University looking guys, Temps Aeternalis employees, chilling in a room, and then they're watching a video, like a slideshow or something, of like a brief of the Kennedy assassination, making sure the Kennedy assassination happens. And then they say that the person that they're attempting to neutralize in this mission is number 5, a 60-year-old old man number 5, the one that like rebelled, right? And then they put number 5, 10-year-old number 5, in charge of the operation. And then we cut back to the Hargreaves mansion, the Umbrella Academy, the place, I guess, where Klaus is digging through Pogo's grave as Diego and Luther watch on. And turns out Pogo's not buried there at all. Actually, who's buried there is a Monsters University guy. And Klaus magically finds out, because he's the most overpowered man on the face of the planet, he magically finds out that that body, that Monsters University corpse that's buried there in Pogo's grave, will help them time travel back to the Kennedy assassination, to stop 5 or something. I don't know. They start to go back in time, but just before they do it, Luther asks, what about the nuclear detonator? And then Klaus is like, I disarmed it. And then it turns out that he didn't. Then there's the shot of like a robot looking down from the moon and Earth exploding. And that's the end of chapter 4. Woo! I have no words. I have absolutely no words. This incredibly weird. Those are the words I came up with. Incredibly weird. But in a good way. I'm really enjoying this. Like I said, very Legends of Tomorrow vibes. More so than the first comic, this is really making me want to watch the show. So, hopefully it keeps up, because the last comic really dropped off in the last 2 chapters, especially the very last chapter. So hopefully this doesn't do it. So, chapter 5, the penultimate chapter. I jinxed it because, well, let's just say it's kind of boring at this point. So what you gotta know is, instead of being placed in Dallas during the Kennedy assassination, Klaus, Luther, and Diego got placed 3 years before in Vietnam, in the middle of the Vietnam War. Diego joined the war effort, Luther ran away to live in the jungle, and Klaus opened a strip club in Saigon. And Klaus apparently has been working on like a teleporting machine or something, and he got Pogo to work on it with him too, because he found Pogo somehow. And then let's see what happens. Oh, and then 5 is in Dallas during the Kennedy assassination, and then he's like directing all the Monsters University people, and then Allison is there too, and then they're trying to like neutralize the 60-year-old version of him, so that the assassination does happen. Anyways, and then we come back to Saigon. Turns out, Klaus has a baby, and that's basically, like, all the relevant information you need, because this is a super lame chapter as far as chapters go. Chapter 6, hopefully it's not so bad that it ruins the rest of the book for me. Like, that's what happened in the first book, and I'm still bitter about that. I'm still very bitter about that, but we'll see. Chapter 6, not so bad. Not so bad at all. It did fuck with my head intensely, and it was kind of convoluted, but not as awful as the last chapter of the previous book was. So I'll give it that. Let's get into what happened. Basically, 10-year-old 5 and 60-year-old 5 are arguing in a warehouse where 6-year-old 5 is perfectly, poised to, avoid killing Kennedy because he doesn't want to kill Kennedy for some reason. And they're arguing, and it turns out Goldfish Man changed their plans so Monsters University guys could kill 60-year-old number 5 so that he can't, even though that might mean that 10-year-old number 5 will die because, And then just as Monsters University guys are about to kill number 5, Luther comes in and, kills them. And then Luther's like, where's Allison? Literally, where's Allison? Tell me right now, number 5. Tell me right now, I'm not joking around anymore. And then number 5 is like, long story, basically. Right? And then they're basically, letting 60-year-old number 5 do his thing so that Kennedy can avoid being assassinated. Because that's what 60-year-old number 5 wants. And then 10-year-old number 5 is like, killing me won't save the president to Luther. And then Luther's like, you're beat. All your gunmen are dead. And then number 5 is like, okay, but Kennedy's different. He's not a man, he's an idea. And to take down an idea, you need words. We just saw a Ben Shapiro of him. Yeah, that's my best friend. That's my bestie right there. So 5 reveals that Allison got her voice back because the Temps Aeternalis people managed to get her voice back for her. And then she, fucks with the president's head, uses her powers to, kill him. And then Luther's like, Allison, what you doing, love? What is the meaning of this? Because Luther and Allison are in love. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. It's incestuous. Luther's, in love with her. And vice versa. Luther's like, yeah, what's the meaning of this? And Allison is like, I had to do it. And Luther's like, you're so selfish. And Allison is like, I did it because I loved you. And Luther's like, what do you mean? And it turns out that when Goldfish Man, Carmichael, told Allison about the 2 agents that he had ready to kill 5's mom before she gave birth to him, and she was like, why should I care? And Carmichael said, because she's giving birth to twins. Allison wasn't the twin that he's talking about. The twin he was talking about was Luther. 5 and Luther are twins. And when Carmichael wanted to kill 5's mom, he also wanted to kill Luther's mom, which is why Allison had to do this, to protect Luther, to see him again. And then they go back to the present, which is where they were before, obviously. And everything's exactly the same. And they're like, what? Why did we have to do this? And so basically it turns out they had to kill Kennedy before he got to a meeting with Hargreaves, where he was going to give Hargreaves the nukes. So since they killed Kennedy before he could give the nukes to Hargreaves, Hargreaves didn't get the nukes, which means that in present, Cha-Cha and Hazel didn't set off the nukes, and the world wasn't destroyed. So, hooray, Umbrella Academy. That was super hard to explain. Oh, and 5 eats the goldfish, Carmichael. I like this book. I would definitely watch the show if it was just this book and I didn't have the context of this stupid one from before. I hate this. It's so bad. But I actually kind of love this. This is good. Very good. Yes.